Jan, stay here if I can ask you, because now all three of you, if I can ask Florian and Thomas to come here and get ready to answer the questions that are coming from you. So, yeah. I will switch for the wire one. So, I would give immediately the space to you because it's fresh now, you have heard it, so if one of you, especially students, have questions, then ask now. And if not, so yeah, I can do this white is very long.
I do want to ask Tom about dramaturgy and curatorship. Just for me, it's obvious I do it all together, but can you just say specifically what is the similarities in the approach? Why is it logical to teach it in dramaturgy department?
Because I guess I would say it's a kind of mirror version of dramaturgy, which is often looking into the inner mechanics of the production, of the work, of the piece, and yet this is a kind of application of the same ideas, developing a critical sensibility from the work to greater heights and greater rigor and depth, but focused on maybe the institutional level. So is there such a thing as a kind of institutional dramaturgy? That would be very much what the curator ought to do, I think, is thinking about the kind of critical mission of a program, the way that a program can be structured to render meaning is like the way that the dramaturg might bring or help the artists to identify structure within a theater production, a theater piece. So I think it's a similar set of skills, actually, critical thinking, but applied to program making, applied to a kind of critical investigation that might be possible through the forming of the program. So just as the production might set out to answer a particular question with a group of artists and collaborators, and the dramaturg might be a key facilitator in that process, the curator can do something quite similar with a group of artists and their works by putting them together into constellation. But I think the root of it is criticism, which is ultimately about grouping things and seeing connections between things, and that's the same element that plays out in a curatorial process as plays out in the production process. So I see a link in skills and also in approach, absolutely.
That's actually a very interesting question, and I wanted to ask something very similar. Does it mean that, because in our tradition, we don't, at the moment, we don't operate with the word curator very much, and if we do, then we deal with visual art scene. Is it somehow connected with the tradition of American theater? Because the position of dramaturgy in this country is very strong. So from all you talk about, what you say about curatorship, I could put the word dramaturg in it, and to me it would mean the same. So is it so because in the US the position of dramaturg is not so strong, so it's better to use another word? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Well, within a US context, and I can't speak for Europe, there was a kind of attempt in the 1980s to introduce the dramaturg into the theater, a very conscious effort, which actually my department played a big role in, and very much was modeled on European, especially German models of dramaturgy, and it was an attempt to introduce this into theater institutions. And it took 10 years, right, before every theater was comfortable having someone, a professional, with this role. This is a similar experiment that has been taking place in the last, I would say, 10 years, really, which was influenced by economics, on the one hand. All of the museums, the art museums, became very interested in performance in some ways, and began to hire specialists in performance onto their curatorial staffs. And people in the theater immediately took notice of that opportunity, believing mistakenly that the visual art world came sort of economic opportunity attached, biennials and global art fairs, and saw a kind of opportunity there. So it's an attempt to borrow the nomenclature of visual arts and apply it in a performing arts context, where people were already calling themselves curators. Festival directors, for example, describe themselves as curators, even though that word doesn't, in the visual arts sense, does not apply to what they do. There's no scholarship involved in presenting, for example. Whereas in visual arts, it's unthinkable to do even the smallest exhibition without making a catalog and having essays and having a symposium. So this is an attempt to borrow that word and introduce that professional role, and perhaps with it, by importing this role, also importing some of the functions. Could we import more of an interest in documentation into what we do? For example, if we are experimental theater, could we write up the experiment the way scientists do? Could we have a catalog? Could we make a publication? Could we reflect on the process? So hopefully with that function, some new developments will be possible. But it's a very artificial attempt to kind of transplant. So we will see what the results are.
Thank you very much.
I should add that some of my students are working in this profession and came out of the original class in 2014, are already working as festival curators, museum curators, so they have been able to get work.
And maybe I would ask, because I'm not sure if I understood fully, when you were talking about this curator lab, how does it look like actually? We're talking about dividing the students into two groups, and then just if you can say more precisely maybe what tasks you give and
Well, we're starting it next year, so we don't know all the details, but our plan is to allow the students to propose the subject areas which they would like to explore. So in some ways this is our answer to them in allowing them to, they're very interested in this generation in the US. It's very interesting, yes, but they're also the most multiracial generation in American history, for example, and they're very interested in all of the gaps in our curriculum. It's a very white curriculum. They want a curriculum that is not Eurocentric, for example. They want to study work that we don't have the capacity to teach outside of a kind of Euro-American context. So they are really pushing for more of that, for example. So they're interested in using this as an opportunity to investigate the subject areas that they have a keen interest in, which we are not yet ready to teach. So we can allow them to propose a module, a list of guests and speakers. We can help them to create a program that addresses their needs and then make it happen. And hopefully teach them how to make an investigation as a part of this process. What does it mean to ask a question and then set out to answer it?
And then there's some second step in terms of performative result.
Yes, depending on what the subject is, it might include live performances. It might include guests who are going to work on a performance with them and developing a performance in relation to some ideas that they want to work with. But it's very flexible. So that's what the students want, and that's what we hope to offer under the auspices of this lab. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Very
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentations and the interesting selection of the panel. I have a question regarding the old lady. It's going back to you, Florian, since you brought her up. I mean, I learned about three programs maybe, who are not trying to follow the market structures or copying them, but to try to find something new. And now we have the old lady, especially in the German-speaking countries, but at least for Europe, it's more or less a sad truth that depending on the country, 70 to 80%, sometimes even 90% of cultural funding goes directly to the old lady. And the old lady has a certain taste. I mean, you did what you do out of artistic and educational needs, I had the impression. You said some people get bored and then they try something else. Again, a question I already raised yesterday to your colleagues from Lithuania. How do you sell it? How do you help your students afterwards And is it part of our job to engage even, let's say, cultural-politically in changing institutions? Is that our job, or isn't it because maybe the students can do it for us?
That's what I said when I said, what will we have to do what will happen when we will be dead? They will make the markets. And I must say, the old lady is a cliché, which is a reality, because a cliché is not a lie, it's a reality, because lots of reactions function on base of a cliché. Money, for example. But the old lady is changing as well. There are lots of other things happening. For some years it was very easy to talk about this is the free scene and this is the municipal theater. And it's not true any longer. Sometimes groups of the free scene are working in dictatorial situations, and in the theater, in the classical theater, there are all different structures implanted. So there is a movement that goes on, but I think it's like the devised theater. It's an exchange of what the young people propose and whether dramaturgs of existing theaters accept, deal with it and try to handle it, and this happens.
I agree that there haven't changed, but my fear is kind of the hegemonic approach or the hegemonic power the old lady has in a way, because for example, the German funding program Doppelpass or other things that try to bring things together, free scene productions and municipal theaters, often work that way in my from my perspective, that the old lady always wins, cliché or not, because in the end, the theater wants to show what it wants to show for an audience that gets, I'm exaggerating, but that gets old and that also will die. So sometimes I dream of ideas of founding new institutions for our students, but somehow I've given up trying to change the given system. Right now it's a comment, not a question.
I'm not so afraid, because there are always new places, what I said as well, which are accepted now officially. It's not the hidden cellar somewhere where some freaks are meeting, but it's official places where you go and when you are sure to see another church. That's one. What is frightening me more is what was already named yesterday, the festivalization of theater, which is always the same production once on a high level and it tours, which I think is even more boring as what happens in municipal theater, because there is, if it's a good interaction, there is an interaction between the people living there and the theater. If there's a change in the direction of the theater, all the town is talking about it. It's gone, why is it gone? There's something behind, we don't know. We pay the taxes, so they should tell us what. At least in Bern it is like that. So there's a better link than all the festival things which fly over and design something.
Festivalization of the theater, it's something we are talking about,
I have one question, bearing in mind the quote that you gave yesterday about from Goebbels. Every skill is ideological. In your narrative, we see a replacement of a traditional training program into something that explores mainly individual development, individual artistic development. I think there's a danger there, and is it an option in your mind to focus more on collaborative work or collective work, or is that too harsh on the myth of individual art?
It was my final points, which coincides very much with what you say. This is the risk of an ego-based thing which lacks experience. And there I find very interesting this approach to take an existing piece and to deconstruct it and to realize that all the themes they have in the ego-based, let's say, in their productions, they appear in a Chekhov as well. And to open the mind in this direction would be something we are going for it. But when I say individual projects, it's not to imagine that there's only one person on stage. It's their idea and there is a lot around.
It's about how you take education. So master students, in my experience, come with the idea of diving into their individual artistic development. Yes. In my program, I really try to form a group, almost a collective, where they have collective learning, bringing in their individual backgrounds, ideologies, skills, etc. But at the same time, with the group work, deconstruct that. Yeah? And I think that in that way, and they resist. Of course they resist. And they can always hide behind the myth of individual artistry. So there's a tension there between what you want, the ideology, I would say, of your program there, and what they expect to come doing.
That's what we try, or what we do with this immersion, where they have to take a distance from their own aim to get involved in something which is strange to them, and they find out if it works well, they find new perspectives. Oh, it could be understood. That's why the master thesis is important for let them enter, but it always changes and modulates. Hopefully, if it stays the same, it's boring.
But in my mind, I try to, that's the last point, in my mind I try to imagine a radical collective approach, which, because then you might say that you build a generation. I think what Tom is doing is more or less closer to that, that can change the cliches or the existing ideology. But interesting. We have a lot of common in our approach.
I have a question for Jan in the first place, but maybe also for the other people. It's about the division here at the school between different departments, as I understand it. The question is, what is the philosophy of, in the contemporary performing arts world, having these divisions? And as I understand, there's really this kind of like authorial acting, that's the department you teach in, and then object theater, and then dramatic acting, and they all depart from a very specific tradition, which I can imagine is very valuable within one school. But my question is, are you not forcing people within, or fixing people within a certain tradition by doing this? Or is there overlap, or is there a possibility of like going in between these different departments, or when students start getting a different direction into their work?
Thank you for this question. This is a problem, what you named. Yes, we talked about with Tom before speaking. Usually, when you really want to teach the students something, it takes time, because it's a tacit knowledge. It's something they really have to experience in their bodies, they have to change actually themselves a little bit in order to become something else. And I have a feeling that the curricula of the three departments are so cramped that they offer very little of interaction. There is some interaction between our department and the Department of Alternative Theatre. But it is limited, not very huge, and I don't think there is a very big overlap between the Alternative Theatre Department and the Dramatic Theatre Department, or between our department and Dramatic Theatre Department. So we are more sisterly, more close in our approaches than with the drama theatre, because you know, drama theatre is the thing. This is for the old lady. And I teach at the Drama Theatre Department dramaturgy, but their approach is like more rigorous conservatory
theater. Full stop.
Well, we are definitely overlapping in the first year very much because this method of dialogical acting within a partner is some kind of what we were talking about yesterday. You know, that it's one of the few moments it's kind of game, but it's not game at the same time. It's really like feeling inside of you what does it mean to be observed, not maybe just to be on stage, but really to be, you know, observed. And it's a psychological method of self-recognition, self-integration. Yeah. So the problem I think of our department is when should we actually touch this drama approach? You know, when. That's again like this question of when the actor should become an actor, actually, and we are trying to postpone it as much as never. You know? And yeah. So.
And then, no, I think it's a general question always made as well from the students. And there's this saying that only if you are strong in your discipline, you bring something new for the other one. If everyone is always interested in everything, there is no added value in the meeting. What we try to do is really give space for those meetings, and there we emptied space. So there is in the University of Bern, there's an institute which is called Y, letter Y, and the students have to have a certain amount of credits that they do in this Y, where they are different students from all different disciplines. And the important thing is that they meet there. Because then, if I program something, now we do a project with sound arts, visual communication and theater acting, it goes wrong. But if there is a pretest to meet, then perhaps after 1-2 years I see the same 3 persons combining something which they thought on their own. And that's what we try to create this movement.
Yeah, as I do understand that, and I think it's very valuable. I think mainly my question is maybe about, because when students start in a certain program, I can imagine some of them have a really clear vision of what they want to establish and really do it. But I can also imagine, and it's as valuable a position for a student as being already very clear, that you just want to become a performer or an actor or a theater maker or a director or a writer, something like that. I want to be in the theater and I want to find my way. And for instance, if somebody here would start in the dramatic theater department, is there a possibility, or I maybe have the feeling a bit that then the student would really be forced into the direction of this tradition, and then there's no way back, or there's no sideways, or there's no maybe if the student would want to turn more into device theater, or after 1 year or 2 years, is that a possibility? And is there an openness even inside these programs, not even between them, inside these programs, to look at other traditions?
Actually, the students for these departments are a little bit different target groups. They choose quite consciously. We don't usually overlap so much in the target groups of our students. When they choose, for instance, theater acting and dramatic theater, they have a quite tough curriculum and they can't make a change during there are projects, there are this faculty grant system which offers the students to write projects, the student projects, and here they can combine sort of with the people from other departments and make a sort of more diverse groups. They are used to some
extent, actually. From my experience, it's limited. It's not very hugely overlapping. But people, after finishing, for instance, theatre acting, quite often do theatre directing. Not vice versa. Usually people who finish directing either do something else but very rarely come back to acting. Maybe Jirka is an example who can do both professions. But you see,
I was just going to add that that's one thing that's really changed even in the 15 years since I started teaching. For a long time, the assumption was that you could train in any discipline and then you could go and work in some other area of the field, of course, and students really saw their training as one step in their larger development as artists. And that meant for our school that we were comfortable with a relatively traditional approach because we thought that we were teaching rigor by immersing the students into one specific discipline. They were free after 3 years to go and change disciplines or to work in an interdisciplinary way, but that we were teaching rigor through method, through discipline. And what changed in the last 10 or 15 years is, of course, that first of all, so much work is interdisciplinary. In all of the arts, there's a tremendous blurring of lines. And also, students want to specialize much earlier. They want to start training as the artists that they want to become in the method, in the technique, in the sphere that they want to be working in from the beginning, because it's a market-driven kind of situation, and they want to make progress right away. That means that we, in our training organization, need to think differently about how we offer that immersion, and we have to offer something very different. So it's a big change, actually.
I know I'm not the speaker, just very quickly that, that actually there is no tradition. We are not giving them a bachelor, no tradition, because really the tradition here is based on drama theater, and all of these non-interpretative tendencies or post-dramatic, or I would rather call them pre-dramatic, are actually, it's a tabula rasa of it, it was here, but it doesn't have a theory here, it doesn't have a critics that would write about it. It was all based on the text staged as a play. So I would say we are not pushing any kind of tradition, and it's one big method of all, imaginable tendencies, methods, docu, immersive, participatory, all these labels, and we are like in the chaos between all of these. But then what we are trying now to do is to design the master program in a very different way, and that's when also like the students from other departments are applying to our department for master studies, because they know that they achieved something, they know more or less what is their style or their uniqueness, and they know that here they can have a space and time to develop it more, and we would even try to find a tutor, not from our school, but anywhere else that would be able to get with you this adventureful journey. And that's where my question for Florian goes. That maybe it's a very banal question, but when you were talking about this very specifically designed master program for people coming from all different backgrounds, how do you do the audition?
Well, we do it not on dossier, we do it physically, that must be clear. Sometimes it happens via Skype as well, but then they have to arrive and we do a final decision. So it's the person that counts, it's not what is written. And then there is really something the projects can be very different, they write, but you can always feel whether there is a thinking behind, whether there is a certain coherence, and it's not written just like that. And there is a certain idea behind it, which perhaps is not others, but you feel a personal strength. And that's the job. And so in the jury, there are persons as well. There are visual artists, there's a musician, and there are theatre persons. Always visual artists with other contexts as well. but there are different views on that. But I think it's, you feel anyway whether there's a commitment. That's what I said yesterday. Sometimes I don't understand really what they write because it's a new world. I can't deal with it. I don't know it. But I feel, or we feel then there is a wish, a commitment, an urgency behind to do that, and that makes us go the adventure. And then we try to see how we can support and how other students support and combine. And we don't know what happens. There happen performances where when I read it, I didn't understand nothing about it, but I felt that he wanted to do it. And then there was something in the room, you couldn't say, is it an artwork, is it a performance, is it theater? It was time-based, but you understood exactly that there was a rule that made him move, that made him use his objects, and you understood the story, if you want to call it story, but it was not a story. You were 1 hour, you were busy. And that's the more we can't.
Good, I totally agree. Just one quick practical question, and the people who are sitting in the jury from other disciplines, they would work with these people. Are they choosing the people that they are going to work with in the next 2-3 years?
No, they can, but there's no promise. Now that might be that one of those can be the future later, but there's not us defining, because that could be dangerous. I get students where I can work with, because that means money at the end. So it's quite clean, it has to be.
Last 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you all three for beautiful presentations. I have a question, or maybe just throw this into the space, because there's a lot of talking in a way about horizontalization across the disciplines. We had a talk yesterday that this whole term interdisciplinary maybe is as stupid as site-specific, because especially if we're talking about theater, I mean, that has been the essence from the very beginning, but I'm a little curious because it feels a little bit that we grown-ups, some little more, some little less grown-up teachers are desperately trying to figure out what those students down there need and what the future maybe brings and how we can make them ready for that, and we're crafting more specific programs. The question is, how about the horizontalization in the programming between the staff, the faculty, the teachers, and the students? How much are they involved when the three of you create the programs for the future? Is the programming a vertical thing, that you have the grown-up, experienced, expertise, professional staff creating something for the students, or is it actually growing out of an exchange with the students who are actually much closer to that future when we all can be dead?
Well, at this moment in my own department and university, it's happening in both directions simultaneously, so it's a very disorienting moment. We are a very vertically organized structure, and yet it's been a moment of great political upheaval on our campus. The students have been asking for monthly meetings with us to talk about steps that the faculty and the school are taking in the direction of social change, and through those discussions have also emerged a series of curricular discussions, and they are meeting and offering their requests for changes in the structure. So everything is kind of in flux at this moment, and we're having a lot of meetings as a faculty with all of the students and evolving new ideas, and yet we are also meeting privately as a faculty and saying, okay, how can we make sure that these kinds of changes are also offering them the kind of training that we think will be valuable and necessary. And that's a balance that we are still discovering, but it's driven by student demand, political demand, economic demand, and now also we're trying to balance that with what we think is good policy. Wait.
If we are talking about the feedback and the input of the student into the work, do I understand it right?
It's more a question about the programming. How much of the programming of the curriculum takes place in dialogue with the students?
This is a question because the students don't decide about the actually programming of the study programs, because these are somehow negotiated with the accreditation committee, and there are some learning outcomes which we have for every subject actually, and for the whole, and they are in a pyramid way, in a way, so that in the state exams they should show some learning outcomes which are gradually built up during the curriculum of the study program. So yes, there is of course the negotiation about the actual content of the subject. For instance, when I teach dramaturgy, I negotiate with them actually what they would do, like in a normal theater, like I was a partner dramaturg in a small theater of theirs, perhaps an older one, just reading it with them, negotiating with them, opposing them, accepting their perceptions and everything. It's a dialogical process. And the same goes on with authorial acting, actually. The content is open to their impulses.
Very short answer.
It very much depends on how individual things are. All what is very individual is always in exchange with them. The whole structure, the different fields, we have to fix them, because if not, it's a question of energy. If we have to discuss on everything, so there are students who say, well, I inscribed for that, so I want to have it, and the other one said, no, I don't want to have it, so there's a lot of energy lost. But the more individual it is, the more it is in exchange with the student, because it makes no sense to have something again. But it's clear that after the 10 years of experience we have now with the master, we have a general evaluation that was the construction side we have at the moment, really, and there we had long sequences of sessions with experts from outside, with students that left the school and are now 5 years in the market, and to evaluate every experiences that are going on. So there are different doors to influence what happens.
Thank you very much, Florian, Tom, and Jan, and all of you, and we have a 15-minute break. Thank you for this.